How to Train a Happy Mind is a production of the nonprofit Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment. Our podcast and programs are entirely free and ad-free thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. If you'd like to support our mission, visit howtotrainahappymind.org. We accept cash, credit, Bitcoin, and other cryptocurrencies, with donations tax-deductible in the U.S. While you're there, you can join our Train a Happy Mind community, which meets weekly for live lectures, meditations, and discussions. Or grab a copy of my book, How to Train a Happy Mind, that features a foreword by the Dalai Lama. I'm Scott Snibbe, and this is How to Train a Happy Mind, the podcast where we explore how timeless Buddhist ideas can help everyday people live happier lives, deepen their relationships, and build a better world. To kick off the new year, we're thrilled to welcome back one of our most beloved guests, Dr. Willis, a trailblazing scholar, inspiring practitioner, and powerful storyteller. Today, Dr. Willis guides us through the 6 perfections: generosity, morality, patience, joyful effort, concentration, and wisdom. Profound practices that were once closely guarded secret teachings. In this episode, Dr. Willis offers a heartfelt introduction to these transformative ideas, weaving in stories from her own remarkable life. She shares insights she's learned directly from the world's most revered Buddhist masters. She reflects on navigating and resisting the racism she faced growing up in the segregated South. And she shares her insights as one of the foremost Western practitioners and scholars of Buddhism. And that's just the beginning. Throughout this year, we'll dive deeper into each of these 6 perfections with inspiring interviews, meditations, and discussions. If you're ready to discover how ancient wisdom can meet modern challenges, you're in the right place. Dr. Willis, it's such a pleasure to have you back again. You're a very popular guest, just as popular with our listeners as you are with me. So thank you for joining us again.
It's a great pleasure, always is.
This is going to air at the beginning of the next year, and we wanted to start out with a very beautiful topic for Mahayana Buddhists of the 6 perfections. Of course, the first question, what are the 6 perfections?
Well, the 6 perfections we call the 6 paramitas, or bodhisattva activities. Also, a little bit bodhisattva qualities. They're transcendent activities performed by one who's taken the vow to liberate all beings. The 6 are giving, moral deportment, conduct, patience, joyous effort, meditation, and wisdom. But even before Buddhists talk about the 6 perfections, it's important to talk about bodhichitta, because bodhichitta is really the gateway onto the Mahayana path. So what is bodhichitta? Chitta means both heart and mind. So bodhichitta is this rarest of thoughts, this selfless desire to benefit all others, to take all others out of their suffering.
You know, I'm curious for you, when was the moment for you when bodhicitta awakened?
That's a wonderful question. I can't pinpoint a time when it's happened, but I can at least talk about when the self drops away. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the rarity of this thought. It's an altruistic thought where others really become more important. And I think we've all experienced that. Mm-hmm. It's arisen for us countless times in life. Whenever we protect our child's in trouble and we grab them, right? We're definitely thinking more about that child than about ourselves at that moment. That's a glimpse. That's a bit of the arising of bodhichitta. So I've had occasions where I don't say, oh, that was bodhichitta afterwards. I simply have done what was necessary and then feel good about it because you helped a sentient being out of danger.
Of course, we hear a lot, it takes courage to be a bodhisattva or to want to be one. But to admit why it takes courage, because it's dangerous.
It could be dangerous.
Quite dangerous. Being nonviolent is dangerous. Interestingly, this is a good moment to bring this up, because we've just gone through an election. For people scratching their head as to how you could have that altruistic, loving wish, even for the person you didn't vote for and the people that voted for him or her. How do you do that? How do you do that for someone who's new to this idea? Or even someone who's been trying to practice it for a long time?
So we've had this election, and I think the only advice is that we have to try to remain calm and clear to see our best way forward here. Because if this were a duly conducted election, and I guess it was, then we've had a message. And the message is just, we've been out of touch, maybe. So we need to be calm and clear and figure out why this happened. And of course, we need to generate love and compassion for ourselves as well as for the so-called other side, because we're never about ever hating, that is, to the point of view of reducing someone's value because they didn't vote with us, right? So these are still beings that we have to cherish, though it might be difficult. And I want to always say it's not the people, it's their attitudes or their ignorance. Those are the enemies, right? And so what we want to do is bring them as well to relief from ignorance and to have them liberated. And wisdom does that. So we have to hope the cloud of ignorance lifts from ourselves as well as others so that we can come together and go forward.
Very wise and unify. We're not hearing so many unifying messages, so thank you for that. Let's get into generosity. We have 6 perfections to go over. The generosity in the 6 perfections isn't exactly the same generosity we all just know every day. So tell us about generosity, and if you can, through the lens of your own experience.
Whether or not one has an actual concrete material gift, generosity, the perfection of generosity, is the perfection of the willingness to give. I think it's about the practitioner's mental and emotional willingness to give. So it said we can give material objects, what the Bodhisattva is known for doing, giving fearlessness, and giving dharma, right? So these are called perfection. They're called paramitas. But paramita is called perfection because it's a selfless activity. Whether it's with giving or it's with ethics, moral deportment, or patience or energetic endeavor, what marks them as being perfections is that they're selfless. They're done selflessly. What does that look like? Well, we might not be able to tell from looking from outward appearances. There might be a person who has not a penny and is contacting a group of people who are asking for donations. You can't tell from the outside. You might see a crowd of people in the doorway there, but you can't tell who's really giving most, right? Because a person who's giving most might actually be penniless. But their perfection of giving is so developed that they have this incredible giving mind. They have the intention of giving, right? Which is selfless and can't be measured in material things. Aryadeva says this pretty much. If you give something with an expectation, there's no gift there at all. There's just a negative activity on your part. Otherwise, I give you something and I expect something back. That's a business transaction.
And what about fearlessness? Someone might ask, how do you give fearlessness? Buddhism sees fear wrapped up with aversion, right? It's wrapped up with the delusion. So how do you give somebody fearlessness?
Okay, Scott, I did this past week.
Yeah.
They're not big things. Somebody calls me, a friend of a friend, says, I'm stuck in Atlanta. There's no more flights for the next 4 days. Can I come? I said, sure. I could see the relief.
Mm-hmm.
Person arrives. I say, I've got clothes your size. I've got a laundry, we can wash them. I've got food. That was great timing. We can watch a movie later. And you could just see the relief. It says, okay, I don't have to stress about this. And that's a kind of easy fearlessness we can get. We can just be a refuge.
Yeah. And the way I often think about this, the different translation that I've been taught is protection, which you're describing, is that you can make someone fearless by protecting them, like you did with your friend, right?
It's simple. I think that's simple. And we can all do it so easy. We have a place. Yeah. Somebody needs it. So I think, yes, we think protection, and maybe we're thinking warrior and gladiator and those kinds of movies. So we have to be this super heroine. We have to jump in front of them with the sword. That kind of protection. Well, if we're not in that situation, we do what we can do. And it's much simpler.
So what about this next perfection of morality? The word morality to people today is sort of not even a good word. It's sort of funny the way people think about it. So help refresh and renew this word. That's one of the perfect practices of a bodhisattva. What is morality?
It's a kind of way of carrying yourself in the world. It's moral deportment. I always like to put deportment on that. It's something about carrying yourself honestly in the world.
Living with integrity, yeah.
With integrity. Moving about the world with dignity and integrity, right? I think the best summation of what Buddhism is Dhammapada 183. I often say this. It says so simply, do no harm, practice what is good, discipline the mind. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. I think that's Buddhism in a nutshell. Do no harm, practice what is good and virtuous, all right? And then discipline the mind so that we can do those two things. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. It's all right there. So from giving to moral deportment to patience to joyous effort, this is why bodhichitta is so important. Once we experience that flash of lightning in the dark sky that Shantideva called the arising of bodhicitta, we should work day and night to take hold of that and to develop that and to nurture that. And all the time we're doing that, we're doing it by practicing as much as we can these 6 perfections and by trying to experience the wisdom that helps us to practice them. That is, that helps us to practice them selflessly. Because otherwise the things are just outward performance.
Just a performance, yeah.
Just a performance. That's what we have to be careful of.
Let's talk about patience. In so many ways, this is the pinnacle of Shantideva's book, this chapter on patience. And I think to your average person, they wouldn't necessarily say, oh, that's the most important thing. What does it even mean? It's hard even to translate, right? What that perfection is. You've had a lot of chances to practice this one in your life. So again, reflected through the lens of your own experience of when you've been able to practice this perfection of patience.
The first Buddhist principle is do no harm. Patience is what allows that to be a possibility. It's not laying down and doing nothing and letting someone else walk all over you. That's not patience. Patience is what prevents us from harming another. And when we harm another, we harm not only another, but we harm ourselves. So patience, oh, wow. If we become angry with another person, I get this all the time. People want to say, oh, come on, there's justifiable anger. There's righteous discontent. I agree. That is true. Use it as a spur to change something, to change a system. Use it as a spur. Don't use it as the fuel. If you use it as the fuel, you're hating. If you're hating, you're full of harm. You take the other as enemy if you hate. And you don't want to take the other as enemy. You want to get along with them. This is the lesson of nonviolence. Truth and reconciliation. You have to get along with you. The election. We can't just say, okay, I'm going to wall myself off from all these other people who may have voted the other way. Right? Or prime example, a person who was in South Africa at the time who told me the story of being in the soccer stadium when Nelson Mandela came to talk to them. And he said, we were all these young people. We were ready to light the town on fire. We were ready to raise everything in our view. It would have taken only one word from him. Go. We would have done it. He says, but Nelson didn't say that. He said, Mandela says, we are going to live together. We're going to live together. And therefore, there must be reconciliation. You see? Therefore, Desmond Tutu helped to found these truth and reconciliations. We have to live together. In the U.S., Black people make up a certain percentage of the population. If we are going to get free and have a multiracial democracy, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us together to make it. We can't just make it on our own. What are we going to do? Secede and have 20% of the population live in one state? No, we can't do that. We have to move forward together. And the only way to move forward is nonviolent. And so Shantideva's chapter 6 on patience says that everything we've done that might be good is destroyed in an instance of anger, is saying in an instance of hatred where you demean another being. This goes against first principle of Buddhism. Do no harm. So if hatred arises, which is what I try to say, it's hatred that the Buddhists are talking about, not anger, not righteous discontent, not a moment of anger, but it's hatred that devalues another human being, that really wants to destroy another human being rather than stop the negative actions they're engaged in.
It's very subtle about anger because of course you don't want to, deny it or pat it down. How do you mentioned earlier, how do you use anger as a spur rather than as something that stokes, hatred and separation, otherness?
So behind aversion and desire is ignorance, right? We think we're separate beings. But the nonviolent movement tries to impress upon people that you got to have a second word there. It's nonviolent resistance. And you can resist an evil action without hating the person who's coming at you. The most moving and powerful narratives that I've read about people facing people with guns is that, we looked at each other. We saw each other eye to eye. I saw this policeman cry. He recognized that I was a human being. That's the transformation. And it's a powerful one you want to have when you can meet someone with love and nonviolence. Love, it can't be left out. That's what makes it nonviolent. We're going to resist you. We're not going to hate you.
It's not passive. That's the thing.
They think it's passive. You just lie down, you just take whatever. It's pacific, Pacific. I'm not going to come at you with any kind of force. I'm not trying to harm you. I'm trying to get you to stop doing a certain thing. And I'm going to do that with love and nonviolence.
Yeah.
We always talk about our histories in terms of wars. But if we really think about it, the movements that have moved human beings around the globe forward have always been nonviolent. Whether we're talking about Gandhi or we're talking about civil rights movement, human rights movement, we move forward in terms of human development through nonviolent struggles, not through wars. Wars kill people, they harm people, but they don't move us forward. Because when there's wars, there's always a winner and a loser. And therefore, there's always bitterness. And so there's always the need for another war to settle this once and for all. And so war begets more war, and hatred begets more hatred. And so it's endless. Someone, King said, has to be the first to extend the hand of love.
You're quoting the Buddha, right? Hatred never ceases hatred, only love ceases hatred. This is an eternal law.
This is Dhamma. This is Dhamma.
Yeah. It's so powerful. It's so powerful.
I think people maybe don't get it unless they've done it. I don't mean I'm privileging. I mean, there's something that happens when you meet a person face to face who's on a different, who's coming at you with something perhaps you haven't encountered, and you don't respond with that same hatred. Something changes.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really true. I think it's an awakening moment for anyone who's come to embrace nonviolence. Is like a flip, especially if you've been violent with your speech, with your body in your life, and then you change that approach for the first time. It's like the awakening in this life to nonviolence.
There's so much space there.
Yeah.
There's, like.
Do you remember that moment from your life? When was that awakening for you?
You always go after these personal stories. Oh. I knew when I got scholarships and the Klan burned the cross in front of our house when my father was away. I've told this story so many times. I knew that what I wanted to say to those Klan members was, we are a family in here. Just like I see you are there with your wives and children. You are families out there. We're the same. We're the same. You are making a mistake. That's when I knew I wanted to teach, because I was too afraid to say it then. That's when I knew I wanted to do this particular job. People need to know, because of ignorance, they're making a mistake. We are just like you. We are the same. We want the same things. We all wish to be happy. We all wish to avoid suffering. In this way, we are exactly the same. That's where we ought to be beginning. Not this fake, you're white, I'm black. Basically, we are the same human beings.
Remind me how old you were when you had this thought with the Klan outside of your house wanting to do you harm.
Well, I was going off to school, so I was 16 or 17.
Yeah.
But I had seen the Klan before when I was much younger.
It's a very, very moving story. It's very, very and very inspiring for anybody angry today, because what you were facing back then was much more desperate and intractable in some ways than what many of us are faced today. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm back in the South.
Yeah, you came back.
That's all I'm going to say. This is where I'm going to be for the next few years.
Has it changed there in the South? Do you find that, more nonviolence, acceptance, patience, the mission of your life and the wish that you had when you were a little girl, has that been fulfilled?
Has the South changed? Well, Where I live is a pretty mixed community here. I'm living in this little edge of suburbia. It's called Decatur in Atlanta. And there are pockets around the state that are quite liberal. And yet I stayed up till 12:30 on election day until they called the state of Georgia for Trump. So I said, oh, shoot, now I might as well go to bed, because that meant that my vote hadn't gone that far, you see. So the state is divided. And this is 40 years ago. This was the state that gave the first Jewish senator and the first Black senator their chance, right? And then one day later, there was January 6th. So I think people still live in parallel universes, regardless of the geography. And that's another reason we aren't talking to one another. All this digital stuff doesn't help, because people are cocooned into their phones and their news services, and misinformation is rampant, and people aren't, it seems, too discriminating in terms of that. So we have to remain calm and clear and try to see our way through to the best information we can get.
That may be a good transition into the next perfection of joyful effort. This is another one. All of these are hard, right? And this may sound like the hardest one, because how do you maintain joy through things that require effort, things that are difficult, things that take a long time, and that you experience setbacks?
Let's start with a simple thing. Scott sends me an email and said, would you be willing to talk to us about the 6 perfections? Joyous effort. Oh, yippee. Yahoo. Scott has asked me to talk about the 6 perfections. That brings such joy. That brings joy, Scott. I gather my books, see this pile, that pile. I gather them and I'm happy because I'm about to do some research. And I love that. So start with the simple thing. Then, okay. Then you're put on this earth. You have a body that works, a brain that works. Take joy. Take solace in that. Get happy about that. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's a mutual joy, for sure, for sure.
It's true. I love it. So I enjoy it. Shantideva says, what you're doing is you're proceeding from joy to joy. So I think what we need is some real practice with developing bodhichitta. Cultivate, nourish it. Mm-hmm. So what are those things that tell us how to develop bodhichitta? Well, most of the Tibetan texts agree that there are 2 methods. And the one is the 7-point mind training, Lojong, and the other is what Shantideva recommends, exchanging self with others, right? Equalizing and exchanging self with others. And we should practice those. And if we practice those, I think, for myself, tell myself like Shantideva, if we practice those, then we would know how happy and joyous each effort can be. Each effort for the benefit of being can be joyous if, as all 6 of these perfections are, they're based on bodhicitta. They grow out of bodhicitta.
What do you say to someone listening who's not doing Dharma for their living all day, and so someone who has a job they might have difficulty with and not like, a boss maybe they don't like, colleagues, maybe a living situation that's a little difficult or a lot difficult, maybe without a house? How do you maintain joyful effort in stressful situations like that, situations that seem unpleasant, unfair, painful?
I think kindness can change things. At least it can help us personally. Thich Nhat Hanh said, smile. All those 222 muscles, they get relaxed. That is helpful. His Holiness says, be kind whenever possible. It's always possible. I think the simple method we count to 10 before we speak. Before you retort, think, is this non-harmful for the other person? Is it beneficial for the other person? Is it non-harmful to me? Is it beneficial to me? Only if you can say yes to all four of those, make a response. Otherwise, Shanti Davis says, remain like a log, right? Smile internally. Think of alternate ways. One Lama told me once, when I really needed this kind of advice, I was overtaken for almost 10 days by furious anger at a person who had just lay in wait to cut me to my core. And this was a racial thing. I had been researching my family's history, doing genealogy at various probate courts around the South. And on one occasion, I'd taken my sister, and I was talking to this woman. I asked who was the county person who knew all the families and stuff. And this woman was pointed out. So she said something to me, and I said something back. And my sister said to me, Dean, don't talk to her. Why are you talking to that lady? She doesn't mean you any good. So my sister could see something. You talk about the South. My sister's never left the South. So my sister could see something in this woman's eyes, in her manner. She said to me, don't talk to this woman. She doesn't mean you any good. So a couple of weeks later, I was back at this place by myself. And I was looking through a certain book, a slave owner who owned my great-great-grandparents. And it became clear. I said, oh, it was Compton. I was looking for that owner. And I was seeing these tallies, which line up with being my great-grandparents. They're not named. But I'm at the probate courts where you can find wills. And so in the transferring that, in this person's will, he was leaving his two slaves who were connected to me.
Yeah, your relatives. Yeah.
I said out loud, oh, it's David Compton. And here's the woman. And she says, oh, well, David Compton was my great-great-grandfather. And then she followed it up, Scott. She says, now I can see where this intelligence of yours comes from.
Oh, God.
You know?
So awful.
So she had been lying in wait. My sister could see it. This lady means you no good. So when she said that, I was so, because this was everything. This was the history. This was section. This was miscegenation. This was, we can do it all. And I've just been waiting to tell you because I knew that my family and your family, and this is why you're intelligent enough to be doing this. So I go out to my car, I'm just dumbfounded. I go out to my car and I shake and shake and shake and couldn't drive away. I was just holding on to the wheel, and I'm shaking, whole body shaking. It was so painful.
So awful.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was so angry. Okay. And the anger went on and went on and went on. And so a Dharma friend said to me, babes, you really need a Dharma hit on this one. You need a Lama hit. She said to me, you need a Lama hit. A few days later, up from Alabama, back now in Middletown, I go down to New York. There was a conference on, and I approached this Lama friend who took the time to say, tell me everything. And I said, well, and I was so angry, I shook him. He said, well, okay, anger, we know about anger because we have it in our own minds. So, okay, calm down. I don't want to deal with that part. Finally, he said, what was the person's name? And I told him. He said, okay, you take that person. You know what spit is? He said, we spit. We don't want to take it back in, do we? He says, you spit her out and you keep going. You have work to do. Spit her out. And I wanted to make sure I understood him correctly. I said, spit her out, Mama? He said, spit her out and keep going. And I felt better. So their lamas have these different methods. They're listening. They're trying the best they can to help you. And he said, spit her out and keep going. And that worked. I mean, it had been 10 days, but that worked for me. Spit her out and keep going.
To not let her harm you, not let your mind be harmed by.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are these methods, and it's wonderful that we have lamas and people, spiritual friends we can go to when we're really stuck.
Yeah.
So I know about anger, and I know about its destructive properties. So best to get rid of them, spit it out, keep going.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. It's so painful and so inspiring as to how you were able to overcome it only in 10 days. For many people, it would take 10 years.
I don't know. 10 days seemed like a lifetime. I was so glad for his advice. So grateful.
Yeah. So now these first 4 perfections are more out there in the world, you know. The next one is concentration, the 5th perfection. What's that? Why is that a practice of a bodhisattva?
Well, wisdom's always the last, right? And it's always preceded by concentration. Because we're told with the 3 higher trainings that are the hallmark practices for Theravadins. We have to train in these, listening and reflecting, and wisdom comes from what? Hearing them and reflecting upon them, and then from the meditation, from concentration on gaining the wisdom. That this is not conceptual, that it has to be an experience. And then for that, we have to go to meditation. Because this is not something we can just think our way through. This is not just something we can decide. So I could decide I'm not angry with her anymore, and then I see her again, you know? It's not something we can decide. It's something that we have to internalize. Meditation is what helps us internalize, so it becomes real. It becomes part of our experience. Concentration
is difficult, right? I like how you wrap it up with wisdom. You know, what are you going to concentrate on? It's not just the breath, right?
So this is the analytic meditation. You have to really think about these things, you know, and it has to become part of your mind stream. My favorite quote of Shantideva's all time is from the Meditative Concentration chapter. In its chapter 8, verse 129, it says, all the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others, while all the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for myself alone. Now, I've had people question me on that, you know, and I say, check up with your own experience. Just check up. Don't just dismiss it out of hand. Check up. Lama Yeshe would say, just check up, dear. Now, that's verse 129. Verse 130 says, childish beings look out for themselves. Buddhas labor for the good of others. See the difference that divides them. Oh, Shantideva is just so right on it. And, you know, here's Shantideva, who kept this all a secret, you know, who was known as the good-for-nothing monk. All the other monks at Nalanda wanted to kick out. And then, so what was he doing in secret? What was he doing in secret? He came out with this. He was writing this, you know, which has benefited us for centuries. Benefited so many beings. In verse, that's pleasing to hear. This is Nagarjuna's Guide to the Bodhisattva Path. And he says that there's a way you tell a genuine bodhisattva from someone who's just play acting. A genuine bodhisattva works for the sake of dharma, not for self-benefit. A genuine bodhisattva works to develop meritorious qualities, not for fame. A genuine bodhisattva wishes to liberate beings from suffering and does not wish purely for his or her own happiness, and accomplishes all these virtuous activities in secret. In secret. He knew the 7-point mind training, and he knew exchanging self with others, but he apparently only taught the Tibetans the 7-point mind training publicly. He taught to only a very few disciples the practice of exchanging self with others. It was for a teacher, a secret teaching. Now, is it secret just because you don't share it with everybody? Or is it secret because of what it is? And this, what it is, was Tonglen.
Mm-hmm.
He made this not a public teaching, this exchanging self with others. Why? I don't know, I'm thinking. Did he think it might be misunderstood? Did he think it might disparage people from practicing? Was it just too difficult and too overwhelming? I think it may have been that he thought only the sharpest, the people who had developed most wisdom could understand this Tonglen practice, right? Because what you're saying there is that you're taking on being suffering and you're giving them your own happiness, right? This is not something to play around with.
Oh, it sounds very overwhelming, right?
It sounds overwhelming, doesn't it? That's why I was so happy when Bhikkhu Bodhi one day at a conference said to me, oh, it's much better if you just start with something simple, like your little bitty baby self. See your little bitty baby self crying, wailing. What do you need, Jan? Oh, need a bottle? Here's a bottle. No, need a hug? Here's a hug. He said, start small.
So literally yourself as a baby.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very good.
Myself.
Yeah, because I think
you feel really close to who's crying. You can solve it.
That's very wise, because people who are feeling some self-hatred and disappointment, to think back to yourself as a baby, you can't. You can't. So it's very wise advice. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that before. That's a good one.
He gave that to me in a private counsel. Says just so simple.
All right, the last perfection of this minor topic of wisdom. How do we sum this up?
All the previous 5 perfections have to be performed with this wisdom. And as you do it, the wisdom grows and develops. It's called enlightened mind, but it's wisdom mind and compassion mind, both. And I think the 6th perfection is they just mean it's the perfection of that wisdom. It's like Buddhahood. It's knowing what the Buddha knows. But as you know, there are stages and stages, even then. There's 10 bodhisattva bhumis. And they're later, the 6 paramitas are extended to 10 paramitas to go along with those 10 bhumis. So that's happens historically, I think, in literature. And so you get other things added, like upaya, skillful means, and bala, strength. There's another reason, I think, courageous, compassion, brave, bodhisattva. But none of it can just be accomplished overnight. If we believe, and we've seen it in our teachers, if we believe that the path is effective, then we shouldn't feel bad. It's possible. It seems daunting, but of course it's possible. And it's more and more possible, I'm convinced, the more we practice the early simple teaching. 7-point mind training. These things work. They worked for others, they could work for us. Because we all have minds.
When someone who's less familiar or unfamiliar at all with Buddhism asks you about wisdom, emptiness, how do you explain it to them?
Wisdom in Buddhism is the wisdom which allows us to conquer, and I want to say defeat, but that sounds too violent, to defeat ignorance. The only thing that defeats ignorance is wisdom, right? This is why it's so important. Well, what is the wisdom? Well, what is the ignorance? I have to ask ourselves. The ignorance is believing, as we mentioned earlier in this conversation, that we exist as separate entities, right? The ignorance is believing that this I, that I have just projected out into space, and I do it every time I wake up. I project it and then I get attached to it. I cling to it. I guard it. I want to protect it. The wisdom says, this is something I projected. It's totally illusory, right? That's so freeing, right? The Buddha said, I have seen you, maker of the eye, and no more houses will you build here, right? So we have this ahamkara, this maker of an eye. We project it and then we cling to it. So Buddhism, I think, basically teaches that we suffer because of our own doing. We suffer because we cling to an illusory I. And doing so makes us wish for certain things, to have them, and wish to be without other things. And wisdom tells us, shines a light on, it was an illusory thing that you were clinging to. Let go, dear. Just let go. Then you find a freedom that you've never experienced before. Let go of it. You feel a lot lighter. You feel much, much more spacious without having to defend this all the time and to cling to this all the time and to hear negative words and so, oh, it hurt this. No, the ignorance is what keeps us suffering. The wisdom is what releases us from that. And the emptiness of a self-existent I, the non-existence of that, is what frees us.
Freedom from that ego that's not really there. That's our worst enemy. Yeah.
It's not really there. But what a powerful thing it is in our lives, no matter how hard we try. Even if it's not so strong, we still have this vague feeling of I. And people who are wise know better.
Yeah.
Might be nice to feel that.
It might be nice, yeah. Well, Dr. Willis, thank you. This was really both a masterfully informed and also deeply from the heart conversation about this beautiful path of 6 perfections and your own experience understanding and practicing them, teaching them too in your life. So thank you so much for joining us again. What a special opportunity. I really appreciate your joyful effort in having another conversation.
Thank you for the invitation. You always ask me to talk about fun things.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for joining me for this inspiring conversation with Dr. Jan Willis. If you'd like to deepen your meditation practice and connect with like-minded people interested in the ideas we explore on the podcast, visit howtotrainahappymind.org. There you can sign up for our newsletter and join our Train a Happy Mind community, which offers weekly lectures, meditations, classes, and discussions. You'll also find links there to purchase my book, How to Train a Happy Mind, available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. It's a modern approach to Buddhist wisdom that features a foreword by the Dalai Lama. If you can, please also consider making a donation to support our nonprofit podcast. How to Train a Happy Mind is a project of a skeptic's path to enlightenment, and we rely entirely on the generosity of our donors to keep our podcast and programs free and ad-free. To contribute, visit howtotrainahappymind.org. We accept cash, credit, Bitcoin, and other cryptocurrencies, and your donations are tax-deductible in the U.S. Thanks to Annie Nguyen for production and story editing, Christian Parry for mastering, and Isabella Acebal for marketing. We wish you a wonderful day.